All right, imagine, you're born here in the United States. You've been here for decades. You finally decide to say, hey, you know what? I want to take a trip. And you go out on this trip. You're hungry. You go to their local grocery store thinking you're about to find your most favorite snack, food, drink, only to realize that not only is that food not on the shelf, that drink not on the shelf, but it is actually banned in this country. Then you get an epiphany. Hey, what other foods are banned in other parts of the world that here in the United States I'm allowed to eat freely? That's what we're going to talk about today, y'all. I'm here truly, Dr. Pierre, and today we have to talk about some of your favorite foods that you cannot get once you cross the waters. And it's wild to think about it. It's wild to think that here in this country we have foods that we eat on a daily basis that are on our grocery shelves, that are front and center, that if you traveled abroad they'd be like, do not bring that food over here. I was shocked and surprised too. I remember I was talking to a colleague of mine and we were just kind of going down the rabbit hole. How many of you guys have just kind of gone down the rabbit hole when you have a thought in your mind? And I saw this one article. In fact, it was like a social media post, and they were just talking about like, hey, I can't get, this food over here. And I was like, I wonder what other foods you can't get over here and why, right? I think that's probably the more important thing, right? So I'm gonna run down a list of some of your most favorite snack items and drinks, and then I'm gonna we're gonna categorize it, right? We're gonna kind of put it together on why it's banned at some of these other places, right? Because I think that's important. It's one thing to understand, like, hey, yeah, it's banned, you cannot get it here, but the why makes it so much more important. And then we'll say, hey, what does that feel, right? Because again, I don't want you to take this video and say, hey, I'm gonna never eat these foods again, right? I don't want you to do that, but I do want you to kind of just think about, hey, let's think about what we're eating and taking in on a daily basis, right? So the first and foremost, I want to kind of stack this off and I'm breaking it off into categories. I have to do the categories because it makes a little bit more sense for me when I'm thinking about like, all right, foods that are banned. So these foods are banned based on the fact that trans fats are added. You might not know, but some parts of the world don't allow you to put trans fat in products. So these foods you will not get if you travel. Coffee mate. I want everyone to stop here. I wanted to start at Coffee Mate, right? Especially to my morning coffee drinkers who have to have that little sweetener. You can't get Coffee Mate because of some of the things that we add here, in particular trans fats here in this country. You can't get Ritz crackers, again, due to the trans fats. Pillsbury biscuits. Y'all, think about that. Like, you go to your local grocery store right now, it's all over the frozen section. You can't even get Pillsbury biscuits to eat over there. Guess what? Because of these trans fats, right? So again, let's not stop there. That's not where it goes, right? I wish, and unfortunately, there is probably, if you do a Google search, right? Do a Google search after you watch this video. Do a Google search of just a list of the foods that are there, and you're gonna, some of you guys may be like, oh, like it may hurt your feelings, right? So next category, this is based off the substance called BHT. You cannot get Frosted Flakes. You can get Wheat Thins outside of this country in some parts of the world. Now again, this is not every part of the world, right? I don't want y'all posted in the comments, hey, I can eat here, I can eat it here. No, some parts of the world are stricter than others. And I want to maybe should make sure I pause that, because even though I'm going to mention a lot of these foods that you can't get, that you can get here in the United States, but you can't get across the world, everyone is pretty in agreement that the FDA, which sets our food standards, is probably one of the toughest in the world. So imagine that, hey, the body, the governing body that sets the standards, that's probably the toughest in the world, allows some foods here, but doesn't, other foods aren't allowed over there. Again, kind of makes you think. You can't get Wheat Thins, you can't get Frosted Flakes due to this substance called BHT. We'll talk about that. Drinks. This is a big one, and you probably have heard this before because this is probably the more common one. In fact, this is the reason why a lot of people don't drink this drink here. Mountain Dew contains a substance called brominated vegetable oil, BVO. You cannot get Mountain Dew in some parts of the world because of that. I have a lot of friends and family who do not touch Mountain Dew. They, in fact, Mountain Dews that drink, and again, I'm maybe bringing it back. Mountain Dews that drink, that when they're cleaning their car, especially their car battery, that they pour over the terminals. I don't know why. I don't know where they got that from. I don't know if the BVO is making those terminals work. I just know that Mountain Dew is one of those drinks that people do not typically like to touch. Again, you go to your local grocery store, it's right there. But putting it in our bodies, some parts of the world are like, I do not think so. Meat and fish. And this is probably important, especially in this country here, because farm salmon, they're not touching it. They do not touch farm salmon. Chlorinated washed chicken is another thing that we do here in this country that does not fly. I hope you guys are keeping up. And again, I didn't even list all of them. I just wanted us to think about, hey, category wise, why is it, right? Because again, this is why foods get put on the naughty list, right? Because there's certain categories that they fit that say no. Like if you got some trans fats in you, you're not going over here. If you got that BHT in you, you're not going over here. If you got BVO in you, you're not coming here, right? So just so we kind of understand why certain foods hit the naughty list and certain foods do not. Drinks, there's some Gatorade also with the BVO. Genetically modified crops, genetically modified anything is going to put you on the naughty list for some parts of the world. And this is one of those things where you talk and you see these stuff about world hunger and, you know, food scarcity and all these things here. And then you start thinking about the fact that, hey, you know what? Maybe if we genetically modified our foods to make it so that the vegetables grow faster, or make it so that, you know, we have more substances in for the animals to grow stronger and leaner and get healthier. You think that's helping, but there's some parts of the world that are like, hey, I don't know all of that. I don't know what that's entailing. So it's important for us to kind of hit the culture shock. Right, because again, I don't want you traveling in Europe thinking you're about to get, you know, some Ritz Bits, thinking you're about to get some wheat thins. I don't want you traveling in Europe looking for your favorite foods and then being shocked when they're like, nah, we don't have them here. And it's interesting, right? Because I was watching a video on social media where they were introducing some kids to certain foods that we have here that they just don't make there. And of course, when you're looking at it, it's like a social science experiment. You know, the kids loving it. Like, oh my God, they make it this, they make that. Like, I think it was like Popeye's chicken or something. There was some foods, right? But in the back of my mind, that's what kind of drove me to do this week's episode. In the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, probably the reason why they don't serve that over there is because of the trans fat. It's because of the things we add to our foods here that country is not going to allow fly. Right. And of course, obviously, they're like, oh my God, it tastes amazing and rich and all this stuff here are salty. Right. A lot of people are saying it's salty because that's how we do, you know, from a preservative related standpoint. But over there, they're like, nah, we're not doing it here. And then there are some other foods that I didn't even list. Right. Let me break down just before we, you know, kind of give my summary. Right. Because it's one of those things that kind of hit you with the culture shock to say, hey, these are the foods you can't have here, right? Now the question becomes, what do you do with said foods, right? Like, what do you do when you recognize that you can't get certain foods based off the artificial dyes and the flavor enhancers and the trans fats? Like, what do you do from that standpoint? I mentioned, certain canned soups, again, kind of fall in it. There's certain parts of the world you can't have chewing gum because of some of the hormones, in particular, BHA, butylated hydroxyamylose. Again, these are things I don't want y'all to go and try to like figure out the chemical products. That's not what this episode is for. Y'all know how we do here at Lunch and Learn Community. This episode is more just kind of educating and opening our minds to think like, hey, you know what? Some stuff is afoot here. And I don't want you guys to turn around and take and listen to these foods and think that like, okay, there's something severely negative, like cancerous or other guy, because I know how y'all run. I know y'all will go all the way to the fullest. I don't want you to do that. I just want you to kind of understand that in different parts of the world, there are certain things that will fly that won't fly in different parts of the world. Now, it's not to say that like, okay, we are eating like cancerous and all, because this is what I see happen. Like people will take information like this and go to the full deep end and say, oh my God, you see the reason why you can't eat Frosted Flakes over there. It's because it's cancerous. But in the United States, they don't care that it's cancerous, and they let you know that's not it. Right? What it is that there are certain things, and again, we have to go by our guidelines. We have to go by our governing bodies. They say it's okay. They say they understand, hey, yes, there could be some risk, but they're not seeing the risk associated, especially at the level that they think they would need to be associated. So they're saying like, hey, let's pump our brakes here, right? And I kind of mentioned, Kraft macaroni and cheese, a big one, right? Because of the yellow dyes, right? Again, that kind of falls in line, right? So anytime I mention a food, like, I don't want you to think about like, oh no, the food is bad. I want you to think, all right, what are they adding to the food that's making it hit the naughty list, right? Certain breads, certain candies, right? And most of these things I kind of mentioned from that perspective there, right? So again, that's kind of it, right? Like, that's the discussion today, right? It's more of an eye-opening discussion, especially for Lunch and Learn community. We talk a lot about diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol. We talk a lot about focusing on our diet. But we just need to focus on, hey, yes, when we're focusing on our diet, there's certain foods that we should kind of keep an eye on, right? And again, like I said, I'm not telling you to throw away your Ritz Bits, right, or your Wheat Thins. I'm not telling you to throw away your mac and cheese. I'm not telling you to do none of that. I'm just saying, hey, let's just think about other options and other opportunities as far as where to get some of our foods from, because maybe we need to avoid the trans fats, right? Maybe we need to avoid some of the, genetically modified food. Maybe we need to avoid those things if we're trying to live better, live healthier. Maybe, right? For some people it works. For some people it doesn't really matter, right? But again, I don't want y'all to go full out, I'm gonna go not eat anything, right? Because again, even if you're thinking about vegetables, right? Again, there's some things that you may add to the vegetables, some things you may add to pesticides to protect it. Like, there may be some things you have to worry about, right? You're not a walk in the park one way or the other. It's just something to think about. Again, so I'm yours truly, Dr. Barry. Make sure you catch last week's episode. I think we talked about we were talking about Mr. Beast last week, right? So catch that episode. We talked about Mr. Beast. I'm gonna see you guys next week.